You're listening to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. This episode is free to access. If you're looking for deeper connection, join the Purpose Pursuit together, a guided community with bonus podcast episodes, monthly connection calls, quarterly workshops, and practical tools for purposeful work and life. Hello and welcome back, friends. It's great to be with you. Today's episode is very exciting because it is the first of a new format. So just to explain where things are going, we've been chatting at Hello Sidekick headquarters about how we can best connect with the people we work with. And we love doing the podcast and we want to continue, but we are going to shift the format a little bit. So the plan is that there's going to be now every month a couple of short, free to access podcasts. Not really short, I just mean concise and something that you can easily access. We're going to look at different topics. This week's about decision making and feeling overwhelmed. I'll get onto that in a minute. And then there are going to be longer podcast episodes that are available to people who join the community. I really want to create a space where I can intentionally connect with a lot of people I've worked with. I often have women who have done the course who say to me, I've now lost connection with you and you haven't got a facility for me to stay connected to what you do. So we're creating something called the Purpose Pursuit Community. And that's going to be a space where there will be more access to me and to the work we do here on Purpose and working and living in a meaningful way. So if you join the community, you'll get access to extra bonus podcast episodes, longer ones, reflective ones, and also ones where I'm perhaps a little bit more personal. There'll also be a monthly connection call where we just get online and we discuss a topic together, have some accountability, talk about strengths-related stuff and purpose-related things and our work. There'll also be a quarterly webinar where we have experts join us or I deep dive into a topic. And obviously there'll be resources, practical tools every month, longer reads on different topics so that there'll be more for you in that space, but manageable more. It's not going to be overwhelming or feeling like, oh my gosh, there's too much here for me to cope with, but it will be really useful, really practical. And for anyone who wants life and work to feel purposeful and meaningful and good for them. So this is one of our free to access episodes in this new format. And you know, I've got this little timer on my desk, which I've forgotten to press start on. So I'm just going to press start because otherwise I could talk for hours and I'm not going to because I want it to be useful. You're busy people and you know you need to have good content in manageable chunks that you can access. So today's episode is called Why Making Even Small Decisions Can Feel Exhausting Right Now. And I just want to kind of name the experience that we're having or I'm having, and I think lots of people I talk to are as well. And we've got the wider context and we've got the personal context. So first of all, let's start with the context we're in. We are in a moment where we are facing quite significant challenges on a global level. And this moment that we are in is having an impact on the way we are engaging with the world. So if I just talk about my own experiences at the moment, there's a few things I've noticed. I've been finding it increasingly difficult to be focused and efficient at the supermarket. I don't love doing the food shopping. And to be honest, where possible, I delegate it to my husband. But when I go and do the food shopping, I'm finding that I am overwhelmed with the amount of choice there is. This is even in Lidl where you've got limited choice and remembering or keeping on top of the things I need. And I'm finding I am quite slow. Like where I'd normally be like, take this, get this, I'm just slower and less confident in my ability to remember and to take all the stuff I want, even with a list. We're also booking a family holiday at the moment, and it's a holiday where we're going to be moving around and going to different places. And I've felt a little bit overwhelmed with the choices there and how do I know I'm making good choices? And how do I make good use of our money? And what if I get there and the place is not very nice? And the reason I'm giving those examples is it's not my nature to normally be like that. So if I was normally quite, ploddy when it came to thinking about those kind of holiday decisions and doing lots of research, then it would be normal. But it's actually, I've noticed that this sort of decision overwhelming exhaustion is heightened more than it normally is. And there's personal reasons for that. And then there is a contextual, I think, reasons for that too. People are talking about higher levels of brain fog, not being able to remember things. And again, some of that can be some of our age and stage, but this feeling of I can't access everything. I'm rubbish at Wordle at the moment. That's really upsetting me to the point I was a bit cross about it this morning, and I've always kind of prided myself in being quite good at Wordle, and Sammy's beating me like every day, and I feel almost like I don't want to play anymore. So there's this feeling of carrying a lot, my brain not being very clear. And I first just want to say, this is not about you personally failing. And I'm saying that to myself as well. This is there are personal reasons, but there is a wider context to why some of this is getting harder. And it's a human response to quite a challenging season that we are in. So let's just zoom out a little bit. I've got some interesting data for you. I know, but it is worth being reminded that even this podcast is part of the fact that we have so much access to information. I love information. I love listening to a podcast. I love reading the news. I'm constantly wanting to sort of take stuff in and continue to learn and reflect on stuff. The problem is it's almost like our brains are stuck in a mode that is constantly craving that because it doesn't know how to just be at peace or settle back down again. We've got constant information, we've got constant input, and we've got constant low-level urgency. Really interesting, I read that we make 35,000 remotely conscious decisions every single day, 2,000 an hour. Apparently we make 227 decisions just about food alone every single day. I reckon I make more than that because food is a constant thought in my mind, and I think my children probably make more than that. So there is a huge amount of processing that we're doing and decision making we are simply doing. Add to that, we are exposed to about 100,000 words a day, which is a huge amount. Add into that if you're a reader or you like to, do extra sort of word content, 100,000 words a day. And then listen to this, okay? This is unbelievable. 500 years ago, the average sort of remotely intelligent human would be consuming in a lifetime the amount of information that we are consuming in a day. Our brains are not 500 years changed. So that is something for us to understand what we are doing. I'm sure that, we have grown our capacity. Of course we have. But in 1986, which a lot of you who are listening will have been alive, even then, the information that we were consuming was a fifth of what we consume today. And I was a little girl in 1986. And so I can't believe that in my lifetime, that was a fifth of what people are now consuming today. So my experience, your experience, is not the same as our parents. It's not the same as a generation before. Also, those of you who are parents means that our teenagers' experiences are not the same as ours. And so this constant information is having an impact on our ability to make decisions. And sometimes this decision paralysis or decision fatigue can come. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because I've been aware of it myself. I've given you some examples. I'm aware that I am finding some of those things harder. And having researched it a bit, I can see there are contextual reasons for that. And then there is also the moment we're in right now. I mean, I guess I've been around 40 odd years, and I do feel like the world feels more unsettled and uncertain than it did when I left school. So I left school in kind of the things can only get better era. Tony Blair was became the Prime Minister when I was leaving sixth form. So that's kind of my age and stage. And we did have a period of time where things felt more, broadly speaking, certain. And now it feels there is a huge amount of economic pressure in the system. We are also exposed to, as I've just said, about 5 times more news than we were then. There is something called information inflation every year, which means every single year, 5% more information. So think of that cumulative effect on you, on your mind. A lot of that will be exposure to global issues that are not positive. We don't tend to hear loads of good news. By the way, there is a really good Instagram account. I think it's called the Happy News Company or the Good News Company. I think it's the Happy News. And they make an intention to tell good news stories because we are bombarded with not good news. You know, the stuff that's in the news right now is harrowing, both on a country by country level, but also the expose of absolute corrupt behaviours and evil cohorts of individuals working together to do some terrible things. There is a huge amount of social comparison. There is a massive amount of emotional labour, and we have an intense, invisible mental load, let alone the fact that many people's finances are pressured. There is, stories of like global pressures around how we're at what our place is in the world. I've definitely heard there'd be more threats of wars, rumours of wars, more discussion around the nuclear issue than I remember in previous decades. And I know this is just my perspective, but it is wider than that. And I think it's important to just be reminded that that is not normal for us to be knowing and carrying all of that. Now, please hear me, because I don't think the solution is that we then put our head in a bucket and pretend that the world doesn't exist. I don't have a lot of respect for people who just don't want to engage with what's going on in the world. I think there is a need for us to engage with what's going on in our communities and on a global level. But we cannot constantly engage with news that we have no agency in changing. And by that, I don't mean that there is nothing we can do, but I cannot make change in every single type of global issue. So one of the really helpful pieces of advice I've been given is to think about what are the things that really bother you and to try and put your energy into that rather than every type of issue that there is. And just being aware of how much news you're consuming. I've actually tried really hard in January to pull away from some of the messaging that I normally consume on a daily basis. I'm a big fiend for listening to the Newsagents podcast every day. I listen to Rest is Politics a couple of times a week. I check the news outlets every day. I do a lot of that. And I've actually made a decision because I'm aware of my own capacity to pull back from what I would often normally have capacity for. And I think that's a point for us all. Like, you've got to know the season you're in. And your purpose is always lived out in a context. And you've got your local context, and then you've got the global context and the picture that we're in. And right now, I think that context is quite heavy. It feels heavy. It feels more heavy than just usual heaviness. And I don't think that's just me. Now, there's also what's actually going on in our brains, okay? There is the actual decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a psychological term. It's not just something I've made up because I'm a bit tired. And it's understanding that our brain has like its own battery. And the more decisions we're making, that battery is going to be depleted. And if you add into that context I've just spoken about, and then possibly your own context, perhaps you're struggling or dealing with more than you normally are, no wonder your brain is going to have some fatigue. Your brain is constantly having to scan all the options. So even with a small decision, if there's too many options, it's no good. You know, it's not helpful to keep those windows of options open. And it actually doesn't help us to have, we want to buy, I need a new salt and pepper shaker, right? Really low bar decision. But if you go on the internet and look for salt and pepper shakers, even with you saying, right, I want them to be rechargeable and I want them to be there's still hundreds of options. And so limiting choice is sometimes what we've got to do rather than it being perfect. Now, ironically, I did choose some and I don't like them and now I've got to send them back. So that wasn't a very good example, but over comparison and over having to compare everything is hard. So our brain has to like suppress some of those alternatives. And on top of that, we then worry about the consequences when they're bigger decisions. And what you can find with the decision fatigue is that the consequences of smaller things start to get bigger. And you're overthinking things that actually don't have high consequence. And even if you decide not to decide, that's still a decision and that costs energy from you as well. So think about all of what I've just said, layering in our modern life and the way we're living, the amount of decisions we're making and the low stakes decisions we're making. Do I pick up my phone or not pick up my phone? Do I scroll or not scroll? What tab shall I open? Shall I look at my email? Shall I look at this? What shall I eat? What shall I wear? This is why some really effective people eliminate some of those low bar decisions from their life. They say, this is what I wear, and I don't deviate from that. I think there's real wisdom in deciding what are the decisions that we can automate or simplify for ourselves. And that word simplify is one that makes me want to take a deep breath and think, gosh, how can we simplify the information we're receiving? How can we simplify the decision making? How can we simplify things so that actually we can remove some of this anxiety? Now, there's a couple of other things that we need to think about here too, which is the emotional layer. So thinking about who you are as a person. So there's, first of all, just being under anxiety or stress or being burnt out. In that season, your tolerance for decision making is going to drop. And you are not a machine. Thank goodness. And when you care deeply also about getting things right, if you're more of a perfectionist, you are also maybe somebody who doesn't want to let people down. Even small choices can start to feel bigger. I think maybe that's part of my thing with the holiday is that my decision for what we're going to do, there's 5 of us who are going on this holiday, and those decisions have impact on people I care about. It's my husband's big birthday. He's turning 50 this year. I want it to be special. There's a budget. It's not an unending budget, but I want it to be good decisions. And these are, not just for me, they're for others. But of course, there are so many things I can't control about that decision. But when I'm anxious or stressed, and I've had a couple of really big life events, I'm still early bereavement stages, I maybe haven't got the clarity that I might have in other more confident seasons. The fear isn't just about choosing badly. It's about those consequences. It's the impact on others. It's that sense of responsibility. So as you're listening, it might be helpful for you to think about, what is it that underpins your decision making? Is it the fact that you don't want to let people down? Is it the fact you care about getting things right? Is it that you are aware of the impact it might have on other people, or a sense of responsibility? And then what can happen is we either go into paralysis or we make snap decisions that are also not very good ones. Just want to finally add in who you are in your personality as well. Those of you who've been around me for a while will know that I use something called Clifton Strengths, which I think is a brilliant assessment tool. But I also created an assessment tool in my book, which I called the True Strengths Types. It's a simplified version of the concept that is easy for people to pick up and run with. And I just want to give a couple of examples. You can diagnose which types you are in the book, and you've probably got a top 3 set of types out of the different types that there are. But if you've already been through the book or you've looked at that tool, some of you might recognise that you're the thinker. And obviously, if you're a thinker, your decision making could get overwhelmed by too many options, wanting to consider things too deeply, and over processing and getting fatigue. Thinkers are going to get exhausted from caring deeply about choosing well. Then you might be a connector. So connectors are those who are deeply relational, feeling individuals. You could be holding lots of other people in mind. I think this is my problem. Decisions are rarely just about me. That is definitely the way I see decision making. And the fatigue comes from the emotional load that comes with it. Even for me, decisions about my business are not just about me. They're about my team. They're also about the impact on my family and our life and how we're going to live. Connectors can feel heavy because of the relational impact of the decision. What about if you're an explorer? There are learners, adventuring type people wanting to innovate. You see possibilities everywhere. But when your energy is low, those choices and options still remain many. And that openness and open-endedness could also be causing you fatigue. And although choice can feel exciting for explorers, it could suddenly feel impossible if you're on your last sort of reserves at that time. So the reason I've just given you those examples is you need to be seen in the differences between who we are and the impact that's going to have on the way you do decision making, both when you're feeling healthy or when you're under extra pressure. So as we come into land, I just want to give you a couple of thoughts and a couple of tweaks on what you can do about this, okay? So first of all, I mentioned this already, reduce choices where you can. Not everything needs to be optimized. Not everything needs to be best. Oliver Burkeman talks about being about 70% sure, optimize at that point and ship it, especially with low impact decision making. Try and automate what you can. So this is the idea of bringing routine into certain things. Actually maybe having a rhythm for your lunches and a rhythm for your breakfasts when you're busy. This is what I eat is no bad idea because it removes decision making from what you've got to do. Maybe saying I wear black t-shirts is not a bad idea if you need to remove some of those decisions from your life. Like I said, loads of really effective individuals have chosen to do that where they can. It's not boring to do that. Maybe it just gives you more energy for the decisions that really matter. And maybe when you're in a tough decision, postpone a non-urgent decision or put a time in for when you're going to do it and put it on the diary, or find a person you can do it with. And finally, resting your brain is not optional. As much as I've said I'm always on at times, I am learning that I need to do activities that rest my brain, that are single activities or just allow my brain to be quiet. Find ways to do that. Start by just grabbing 3 minutes a day where you are totally silent. Just let your brain do nothing for that time and be compassionate with yourself. The reality is some seasons are easier and the flow comes, and other seasons are much more difficult. I feel like I'm coming out of a really difficult season and I'll have another. And in those seasons, you cannot expect yourself to be on max form. So as you're listening to this, are you in that flow time where actually this is easy and maybe you need to be aware of someone else in your life who's in a different place? Or are you in a season where you are struggling because of other stuff in the system? And in that moment, automate and routine and postpone as much as you possibly can. The goal isn't just to power through, it's to be wise in the season we're in and to maximize what we can within the boundary of our capacity. I hope you found that useful. You can find loads more stuff in the show notes and stay connected. Think about joining the Purpose Pursuit community. Bye for now.